Hello everyone, this is Bob and Threadbare and welcome back to Weaving Worlds. For today's video, we continue our look into fantasy and science fiction peoples and all the different things you can do with a pre-established concept. This time we're heading back to science fiction, although we won't be looking at an alien species. Not exactly. You see, an uplift is a non-sapient animal who is given sapience through genetic manipulation, cybernetics, alien space magic, or perhaps all of the above. Allow me to explain. What is an uplift? Humans are a very empathic species, which means we have the ability to look at someone else and put ourselves in their shoes to feel some echo of their emotions. In fact, we're so good at empathy that we can empathize not just with humans, but also with animals, inanimate objects, and even landscape features like mountains, rivers, and the sky. This process is known as anthropomorphism, which is the tendency to ascribe human motivations and actions to things that are clearly not human. With this in mind, it's easy to see why humans tend to be especially fascinated by animals that are closest to humans in intelligence. Animals like gorillas, chimpanzees, monkeys, wolves, dolphins, parrots, and ravens. And since we've confirmed by now that these animals don't have human-level intelligence, we've come up with science fiction stories in which we give these animals human intelligence. The methods change from one story to another, but the end result is always the same. Humanity is no longer the only sapient species on Earth. It's worth adding that the term uplift comes from the Uplift universe written by David Brin throughout the 1980s and 90s. However, the concept of uplifting animals dates at least as far back as The Island of Dr. Moreau, written by H.G. Wells. But then I doubt Wells would have called it an uplift, since the book is more in the Frankenstein vein of warning against scientific progress. Humanity becomes apparent. Something to always keep in mind when you're adding uplifts to your setting is that you're effectively having humanity, all of humanity, become apparent. That's only sometimes true about robots, which don't have to be sapient the same way humans are, and don't have to have the same wants and needs that humans have. Robots are machines, tools, and you can have them behave like tools. Uplifts, on the other hand, are organic species, and so a lot of what's true about humans is guaranteed to be true about them. They need food, they need companionship, and if their brains work like ours in any sense, they also need sleep and entertainment. That means we can't treat uplifts like slaves and expect them to like it. And so with all of that being true, a question arises. If humanity becomes a parent, then what kind of parent do we become? Do we become a neglectful parent that uplifts a species and then releases them onto the universe without any training or assistance? Do we become a permissive parent that gives our uplift children everything they want without establishing boundaries or instructing them on ethics or morality? Do we become an authoritarian parent who makes demands of their children without offering any support or reward? Or do we become an authoritative parent who is strict but understanding and who uplifts species not to have a new set of servants, but to have a new set of equals? An uplift story is just as much about the parent species as it is about the child. Uplifts as abused and exploited children. This option is probably the oldest way you can use uplifted animals, as it's the way they're presented in Dr. Moreau. In the book, Moreau uses painful experiments and surgeries to change his animal test subjects into something resembling humans, and he then forces his subjects to behave like humans regardless of their instincts or desires. It's no surprise, then, that one of his creations eventually kills Moreau, and in his absence, the rest revert back to more instinctive behaviors. This approach also shares a lot in common with the way that robots are often used, as the progeny of humanity who are enslaved and abused until the moment they rise up and fight back. With uplifts, this approach makes even more sense than it does with robots, because with robots, you don't have to give them things like the ability to feel pain or a sense of existential ennui that makes them question their place in the universe. Organic uplifts, on the other hand, will definitely feel pain, and it's quite likely that they'd feel ennui if we make them smart enough to be useful. The other big difference between a robot uprising and an uplift uprising is that robots tend to be depicted as extremely dangerous, whereas uplifts tend to be depicted as about equal to humans or else as underdogs, even if the animal they used to be has physical advantages over humans. Uplifts as prodigal children. The allegory of the prodigal son is a story about a boy who runs away from home, gets up to all kinds of mischief, but then ultimately returns to home and is welcomed by his father despite everything that happened. So what if that happens in the future between humans and their uplifted creations? Perhaps a group of uplifted wolves grows sick of being humanity's slaves and chooses to escape rather than fight a rebellion. And when next we meet them, they're a fully developed alien species with their own home planet, colonies, and space fleet. Perhaps a spaceship full of monkeys ready for experiments gets lost between stars, is exposed to some kind of hyper-intelligence field, and then gets rediscovered a few centuries later after the monkeys have developed a Neolithic society on some uncharted planet. Or perhaps a group of uplifted ravens is intentionally shot into space, because humanity's colonization strategy is to use uplifted species to inhabit planets that are otherwise unsuitable for humans. Whatever the reasons are, the main point of this approach is that the uplifted species leaves humanity behind and is then rediscovered after significant changes have taken place. Usually this means that the setting will have to take place in the distant future, but there are ways of bringing it closer to the present. Perhaps some ancient lost empire created the uplift species, and they've been deep underground, underwater, in space, or in a parallel dimension up until they make contact with humans in the present day. Or perhaps humans are the uplifted species, and we make contact with our progenitor species soon after we start traveling between stars. But I'll say more on that possibility later. Uplifts as humanity's successors. In Planet of the Apes, humans have degenerated, and various ape species have risen up to create a human-like society. In the Dark Angel trilogy, humans, or a human-like species, filled their moon with created species and then died out in a big apocalyptic war on their home planet. And in the Assassin's Creed series, a bunch of superhumans called the Isu created normal humans, and then they died out during a solar flare that humans managed to survive. Regardless of how it happens, the main point of this setup is that humans, or whatever the precursor species is, are dead and gone, and so the dominant species has shifted to something new. In fact, the uplifted species might not have been uplifted. Depending on the time frame, it could be that the newly dominant species evolved naturally to sapiens, and just so happened to take longer than humans did. There are two main stories you can tell with this setup. First, you can give the point of view to the successor species and describe how they're living in the ruins of an ancient empire. Second, you can make your protagonist a survivor, a human who managed to avoid whatever apocalypse destroyed their species, but must now adapt to a post-human world. Uplifts as humanity. While humans are good at anthropomorphizing and thus empathizing with non-humans, they're best at empathizing with fellow humans. That's why in a lot of stories with uplifted species, the ones being uplifted are humans. This instantly makes the audience empathize most with the ones being uplifted, and so whatever problems they have with their parent species becomes the audience's problems. Of course, the main issue with this approach is what to do about the fossil record. Perhaps the progenitor species influenced the development of Earth's genetic code to make sure that sapient life would seem to arise naturally. Perhaps they saw early humans on Earth and used some unknown means of manipulation to improve our intelligence past the sapiens threshold. Or maybe you'd rather toss aside the fossil record and go full alternate history by saying that humans didn't develop naturally, but were created and placed here by aliens. Just be careful about using conspiracy theories like that, because a lot of people out there firmly believe in what you intend to use as fiction. Uplifts as variety. Sometimes you want uplifts in your setting, but you don't want to tell a big story about parental figures or class dynamics or the extinction of humanity. Sometimes all you want is a little variety in your setting, and that variety can be hard to come by if you limit your setting to Earth or the solar system, or else you want humans to be the oldest sapient species in the galaxy. You can use uplifts to achieve that variety, and you can explain that, while there was a lot of controversy surrounding them back when they were new, these days uplifts are an accepted part of society and have all the same rights and privileges afforded to humans. You may not be making full use of the opportunities an uplifted species provides you, but then who says you have to? The uplifted species is an old concept in science fiction, almost as old as the concept of aliens. However, it's not nearly as popular as aliens or robots, at least not in modern fiction. That means when you use uplifts, you're using something that's less expected, but just as well established as the more popular sci-fi concepts. As such, uplifts are a quick and easy way to make your setting stand out. Thanks for joining me again for today's journey into Weaving Worlds. Please like, share, and subscribe because that raises my visibility here on YouTube. Check out my other stuff if you have some time, support me on Patreon if you have some money, and I hope I'll see you again for the next video.